I'm very pleased to welcome Amitabh Kant. He's the G20 Sherpa for the Government of India. And with the whole world descending on Delhi, he's very much the man of the moment. Welcome, Amitabh Kant.
Thanks. Great pleasure. Great pleasure.
You are the G20 lead Sherpa, so you've had a profound influence in shaping the agenda for this G20 presidency. What was your top priority?
Well, there are several priorities, one of which was to accelerate the pace of global growth. So to have strong, sustainable, balanced, and inclusive growth, because 1/3 of the world is in a recession. 75 countries are in global debt right now. And therefore, to our mind, the post-COVID era has seen a vast number of people go below the poverty line. Over 100 million people have lost their jobs. So you have to accelerate the pace of growth, which is very critical. You have to accelerate the pace of implementation of sustainable development goals, which have, instead of progressing, regressed. And therefore, improving learning outcomes, health outcomes, nutritional standards, all that is critical. Climate action and climate finance is very critical. And then, on top of all this, if you need resources for both sustainable development goals and climate action, you need a very reformed multilateral financial institution for the 21st century. And then, technological development and digital public infrastructure, which is very critical to advanced developing nations. And lastly, women empowerment and gender equality. These have been the key priorities of our presidency.
Now, the G20 presidency is a rotating presidency. What is unique and different about India's G20 presidency?
I think the biggest highlight of India's presidency is that it's been acting as the voice of the global South. It's really been brought developing countries on the center stage. That's important because this particular year, IMF has said that 80% of the global growth is going to come from emerging markets. And 2/3 of the growth in the coming 2 decades will also come from emerging markets. So if these countries are going to be driving global growth, they have low dependency burdens. Their demographics are very young, unlike an aging population in the West. You need to accelerate the pace of implementation of goals in several of these countries. And that's what we've aimed at. Really bring these developing countries center stage in many ways. 6 of the 12 fastest growing countries in the world today are from Africa. So the Prime Minister has pushed for African Union to become a permanent member of G20. This has had a huge, very big support from all the leaders of the world, and hopefully we'll see African Union becoming a permanent member.
So over the past months, you've been having ministerial meetings across India. You wanted an agenda which was inclusive, decisive, ambitious, and action-driven. To what extent have you been able to meet your objective?
I think we've been very successful in becoming action-oriented. Actually, we did not allow geopolitics to get in right in the center. We've pushed all our ambition. We've pushed ambition in all the 4 fronts in many, many ways. That has enabled us to be very, very decisive. It's enabled us to build consensus on all developmental issues. And when we finish with all this in the final round, we'll probably discuss the geopolitical issue.
Is there unfinished business left after all these talks that you've had? Issues like climate change, where you haven't been able to close the gap?
So these are issues which will get discussed when the Sherpas meet now, the final round, and we are very hopeful that we'll arrive at an agreement.
Now, you also said something interesting. You said the G20 is even more important than the UN Security Council. What did you mean by that?
See, the United Nations is a very unwieldy body. It comprises of about over 190 members. The UN Security Council has not been able to drive the world simply because one of its members is also at war right now. That situation was never envisaged when the UN Security Council was envisaged. I mean, when it was formulated, conceptualized. It's a post-World War II formulation. Whereas today, G20 is far more representative. It comprises of both the developed world, that's the G7, and all the emerging countries of the world. So all emerging countries, with African Union getting in, it will become even more inclusive. So to my mind, G20 is a far more important body as far as global growth, critical issues of development, critical issues of climate, all these issues are concerned, G20 is far more important than anything which the Security Council is achieving.
Will you be very disappointed if the Chinese president Xi Jinping doesn't come for this summit?
No, not at all. All G20 meetings, you have some leaders who are not able to make it. Bali, President Putin wasn't there. Earlier, in all G20 meetings, there are 4 to 5 leaders who do not turn up. That doesn't mean a presidency gets impacted in any way. There are other leaders, there are other foreign ministers, everybody discusses. We take it forward.
But China's role is fairly critical in this particularly presidency, because they have been blocking language which was critical of Russia. The Russian president announced a while back that he wasn't coming and he's sending his foreign minister Sergei Lavrov. But with China, one is still not certain. Does India not feel insulted at the last minute?
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. Every presidency, you have some leaders who are not coming. There's so many presidencies where even leaders have gone and opposed. I mean, look at earlier, look at the presidency when it was held in Japan or when it was held in Osaka. Even when President Trump went, he opposed climate action. 3 successive G20s fully opposed it. And yet G20 went ahead and passed a resolution on climate action. It was 19-1. So these things happen in international politics. Couple of leaders always don't come for these meetings. That's part of life. And let me tell you this, that China is a multilateral player. It discusses issues. It may have some bilateral challenges, but on multilateral issues, it's been very positive to discuss, and we've been discussing with them, and we've sorted out quite a few issues with them on this.
So do you think that they will sign on to a communique which might have language which is critical of Russia?
No, we'll discuss with everybody. The consensus has to be arrived at. In multilateral, that's the challenge. The challenge is to discuss with all 20 players and finally arrive at an agreement. Everybody has a veto power. And that's what makes the job very challenging. So we'll do our best.
And the challenge this time for India is that China is not accepting language which it accepted in the Bali Declaration at the G20 summit last year. So that is quite challenging. How are you trying to persuade them to sign on to something which is...
Let me tell you that the Ukraine issue may be important to some countries, some part of the world. But it's not an important issue for many other countries. All the developing countries, emerging countries, for all of us, we've not created the Ukraine war. We did not create the World War I and World War II. For us, developmental issues of growth, survival, future, SDGs, climate action, development, those are all important issues. We need to get a consensus on all those issues and then come to any other issue. So let us not bring one issue of a war which is going on for 1.5 years in Europe center stage on every other issue of the world.
Doesn't the development world also get very impacted by this war in terms of, food security, fertilizers, fuel?
No, it has an impact. And that's why last time in Bali, the G20 is meant to be an economic grouping. It discusses issues of growth, of progress, of finance, and so on. But food, fuel, and fertilizer are impacting the world. And therefore, last year in Bali, the G20 fell back on the United Nations resolution. The United Nations General Assembly and the Security Council are political bodies. It fell back on that resolution and it adopted that.
And it also worked out because of this key sentence used by Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, about this is not a time of war.
That's right. That's right. That was a very prominent part of that statement. This is not an era of war. This is an age of diplomacy and dialogue.
So you're hoping that something like that might happen again this time, yeah?
Of course. We remain very hopeful. We are very optimistic.
And the German Sherpa, your counterpart, the German counterpart said that they will not sign on to any communique which does not, which ignores Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
That is one of the issues. There are many other issues. That's one issue which will also be discussed by the Sherpas when they meet.
But Amitabh Kant, could this issue derail and overshadow the final leaders' summit?
That's one paragraph. One paragraph out of 60 odd paras. One para on Ukraine. Para 3 and 4, Para 4 has already been agreed to by Russia. Para 3 remains open, which will be discussed and debated over the next 3-4 days. We are very optimistic. We are very,
Still have a few days for your discussion. You're hopeful.
very hopeful.
And give me, what is your reason for your hope?
Balance, sustainable, being positive, being constructive. Everybody wants a suggestion. Everybody wants India to succeed. Everybody wants G20 to succeed. Nobody wants G20 to remain a divided house. All countries want G20 to move forward and succeed.
So when the leaders descend on Delhi in the next few days, including the US President Joe Biden, and his first official visit to India, what will they see when they come to India?
Well, they see India which has rapidly grown and progressed. They'll see an India which is the 5th largest economy in the world, which will be the 3rd largest economy in the world by 27. They will see an India which is rapidly advanced in technology. We drive about close to 46% of the digital fast payments in the world. We do 11x payments of what Europe and USA do together. They will see an India which has built a huge amount of infrastructure. It's built about 88,000 kilometers of road. They will, in the last 7 to 8 years, they will see an India which has built a lot of houses, a lot of 40 million houses in the last 7-8 years. They'll see an India which has built a lot of provided electricity to all its citizens. It's a growing, advancing India.
So how important was this G20 presidency for India to showcase the country as a vibrant economic hub?
I think it's important for the world to come and see what India has achieved in the last 7 to 8 years. As the Bank of International Settlement has said, that what India has achieved in the last 8 years is what India should have achieved in the last 50 years. So it has done a tremendous amount of work in terms of infrastructure creation. It's done a lot of work in providing basic necessities to its citizens. It's going to be a growing, advancing economy. Its demographics will remain very young. The average age of citizens is just 29. So you will see prosperity and growth taking place simultaneously for the next 3 decades in India. So it's something which every leader should come and see.
Well, you put in a lot of hard work for this summit, Amitabh Kant. Now, what for you would count as a successful G20 summit for India?
A lot of positive action on deliverables, on sustainable growth, on sustainable development goals, on digital transformation, on women empowerment. All these are critical issues for the world, and that is what India has pushed for and will most probably achieve consensus on all these issues.
And finally, if there was not a communique in the end, because a couple of ministerial meetings have ended without a communique, like the foreign ministers' meeting, would that be a big setback?
No, you're absolutely incorrect. All meetings have ended with a communique. All meetings have had a communique. Only one paragraph, that is the Russia-Ukraine para, there has been a chair summary on that para. But all development issues, there has been a complete consensus on all developmental issues. We are very hopeful of achieving consensus on all developmental issues.
That is correct. But if there isn't that consensus,
doesn't matter. So what?
It won't be a setback?
Of course not.
Wouldn't reflect on India's presidency as G20?
Why?
Because India played such a critical role in the last presidency.
All developmental issues we've achieved consensus. We've been very ambitious. We've been developmental in all the issues of which concern the world. Why should we get caught up in one issue concerning Ukraine? Why should we get obsessed with one war which is taking place, which does not impact 90% of the world? All developmental issues will achieve consensus and move forward. That's more important for us. That's more important for the global south. That's more important for the developing world.
Because that one was impacting developmental.
So let everybody then agree that is impacting. It's not incumbent only on India. Everybody needs to agree. Then it's everybody's war. Why is it only India's responsibility? We'll do our best.
And you're hopeful, as you said.
Of course, we are always be positive and optimistic.
Because we have a few days of negotiations still to go, the Sherpa negotiations before the leaders arrive here. And you're hoping that...
Of course, we are very positive. We are very optimistic. We'll get everybody around.
You'll get everybody around. That's a good note to end. Amitabh Kant, the Sherpa, the G20 Sherpa for the Government of India. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Yana. Yes, great pleasure.
Yeah. And that was Amitabh Kant, and he's the G20 Sherpa for the government of India. And with the world leaders descending onto the Indian capital in a few days, he's very much the man of the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you.